Hello class, can you believe it's week 6? Professor Natali here to provide an overview of our topics on performance management and training this week. There's a lot to cover, and we're going to have two related topics, performance management and the tie to training. We wrap up the design phase of our jobs, and once people are hired into the positions, HR and managers need to monitor and manage their performance, not micromanage, just manage. So this week in Chapter 10 of the text, study the performance management cycle. As we evaluate whether the person is performing the job duties, we gather 3 types of data: trait-based, behavior-based, and results-based. So results are the key to a performance-focused culture, and HR plays that strategic role in driving this. Next, you'll read about performance standards, the goals, targets, benchmarks, KPIs. They go by a lot of terms, and they're all based on the organization. Several methods are employed to evaluate performance. Manager ratings is probably the most common. Self-assessments is becoming more common. And in some environments, getting input from peers may be helpful, as it's what's called a 360 appraisal, where the manager, peers, internal and external customers give input via like a survey on their employees' interactions. Another commonly used method is MBO, management by objective, and this is coupled with goal setting. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of your organizations don't use this particular method. With the appraisal, we use numbers and narratives to measure the level of performance. Some of the scales used include graphic rating scales and behavioral rating scales. The other ways we can measure performance is by comparing it to others through a ranking system or a force distribution, which looks like a bell curve, where you have maybe 10% at the bottom, 10% at the top, another 30 on each side, and then the top performers right there in the middle. A key focus for HR in the performance appraisal process is in combating what we call rater errors. These are biases that get in the way of accurate reviews. HR's role is to provide training on how to be objective and how to reflect on one's own thinking that may be biased. A little bit of mindfulness there. The connection between appraisals and training is that performance review information can be used to identify gaps and opportunities that can be addressed by training and or development. HR plays a strategic role in training to enhance organizational competitiveness and sustainability. Building a knowledge management database is one method for transferring knowledge from one person to another or another group. Using the performance management data to inform sales training, both the skills and behaviors leading to higher sales and profit for the organization, is another way to improve operations. And knowing who has what skills and how they perform can also be used for global assignments, such as ones for succession planning. You will read about various types of training, and there are legally required workshops such as annual or semi-annual sexual harassment training and ethics training, just to name a few. Training can also be provided on some basic skills, even English speaking in some companies. We are all most likely familiar with the job and technical training in organizations, where we learn the company's software, practices, and processes. This usually follows orientation and is part of onboarding. So how does a company determine what training is needed, though? This is done through a training needs analysis, and we look at the overall organization, the tasks, jobs themselves, and the individuals performing them. What does a company need to accomplish? The organizational. How does that work get done? The tasks. And what skills do the employees in those positions currently have? What are the gaps that we need to address? As we design our training, it is important to keep the learner characteristics in mind. For example, it is safe to say all workers are adults, and we know adults learn differently than children, so our training needs to accommodate it. We also know learners absorb information differently, visually, auditorily, and hands-on, so our training needs to be designed to accommodate this as well. Finally, we have to consider the mode of delivery: online, face-to-face, asynchronous, gamification, etc. Last but certainly not least, it is important to measure the return on investment of our training endeavors. Companies can spend a great deal of money on training, and it is important that the investment pays off in the form of productivity, quality, service, etc. The famous model of measuring training effectiveness is by Kirkpatrick. Yes, we actually use it and talk about it in practice. We measure learning by the user's reaction. We measure actual performance, which is actually the learning, and of course we measure results. Assignments for this week are pretty standard. There's a discussion on performance evaluation system and it ties to motivation and organizational effectiveness. Your learning reflection for week 5 and this week 6 is also due. I'm here to help in any way I can. Just let me know.